right. Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello.
We are getting going today for Kelly's amazing copy clinic. Or no, we're not. This isn't copy clinic.
Yeah, this is a copy convo. We're going to talk about secrets of storytelling.
I love it. Hey, Vanessa. Hey, Andrea.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm all right. It's warm here in the UK. Yay.
Yeah.
I'm indoors.
It's warm here too. There's a heat advisory. They're like, it's fine. Is it?
Yeah, London doesn't do very well with the when it gets hot. We just melt. We're not set up for any weather. Not snow, not wind, not rain, not sun.
I live in the South in the United States, and it's like, it's hot again. Awesome. Tornadoes, fantastic. All right, we are going to get going on secrets of the storyteller. I'll share my screen. Give me a moment. I'll make sure it looks right. Cool. All right. Well, welcome. This is in conjunction with Modern Business Mastery. If you're not a part of it, you really should. It's so perfect. It's an amazing community. I am Kelly Harris. I am the resident copywriter. I'm a resident council member, and I help entrepreneurs find their voice to live purposely and powerfully through the confidence of themselves and their message. I make your messages matter more. I help convert subscribers to super fans effortlessly with my heart framework. I have 4 beautiful babies ranging in age to 14 to 10 months, and we have 2 crazy dogs, and I am married to an amazing guy who is totally okay with my crazy ideas. Sometimes, not always, but most of the time. If you want to connect with me, you can connect with me on Instagram. It's Kelly Harris Creative. Facebook, Kelly Harris Copywriter. LinkedIn, I do a weekly newsletter, so those are always fun. Or you can always shoot me an email, Kelly with a Y at kellyharriscreative.com. Now, this is a community session through Modern Business Mastery. There's some great ways that you can connect with us. There's the Modern Business Mastery free community. It's great. They have a LinkedIn. Go visit them on Instagram or even on YouTube. And then within the free community, we do a lot of sessions, a lot of mini trainings. We have a monthly virtual work sprint. We do monthly mastery elements for personal and business growth. We do fitness and nutrition. You have access to copy clinics through me, where if you give me your copy, I will tell you how we can make it even more amazing than it already is. And then we do a quarterly book club as well. Or if you're wanting something that's even a little bit more support, you can do the Modern Business Mastery Academy. This is designed for entrepreneurs seeking clear, actionable steps so that they can grow their business, which has got lots of wonderful things in it. And then if you want even more support, you can do M360, which is a year-long business integrative mentorship community that combines one-to-one coaching with weekly group sessions to guide your business week by week. This is the amazing support. To be 100% frank and honest, this is one of the only 2 communities that I have found online that really, truly support you, both on a personal level and on a business level. And then we have yearly courses and workshops. And then within the Modern Business Mastery community, we have work bubbles, we have Nourish and Flourish, we have copy clinics, and then things like today are copy convos, which are a little bit different than our copy clinics. And then we have reflection and planning sessions, as well as community sessions. So that is the announcements out of the way, and let's dive into it. So today we're going to talk about why should you use storytelling? Why should you tell your story? How we're going to use stories to breathe life into your business. How are we going to use storytelling in our business? How are we going to use it in our copy with our words? And then we'll have time for a Q&A session. And to be completely frank, there's actually 2 other sections that as I was going was like, oh, I like that. We're going to throw that in. Oh, I love that. We're going to add that too. And so here's the thing. Why tell stories? Stories are what connect us. We've been storytelling far longer than we've had the written word. I can't remember how long it's been. I could probably look it up, but something like 10, 15, 20,000 years longer have we had the written word, and we use stories to tell our history. We used to tell oral history and pass that down from generation to generation until we got into the orthography, the written letters, the written words, and began to actually have a written history. So our history goes far, far farther back in terms of an oral history, because stories were what people could remember. They talk a lot about how if you ever read the original like Grimm's fairy tales, they don't end well because they were meant to keep the children safe. And so if you actually read not the Disney-fied versions, but the actual real ones, were stories that were like, stay out of the woods. Don't go into these places. It's not a safe place for you to be. It's not. And that's how they taught kids. That's how they pass down their values, their core values, all of those things from generation to generation. So telling your story makes you relatable. There's going to be someone somewhere who has a similar business to yours, who may have a similar power pitch to yours, which may have similar products and services to yours. But telling your story is going to make you relatable, and it's actually going to help them, your ideal clients, pick you potentially over your other competition. And like I said, the secret sauce truly is you and your story and how you got here and how you serve people. So those are reasons. Now there are currently, because I looked this up last night, there are currently 33.2 billion businesses just in the United States alone. And 99% of those are small businesses. So how are you going to stand out and tell your story? So you need to tell who's behind your brand. Why does your business exist? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? What do things look like behind the scenes, and why you and your product and your service are different? All of these things, telling stories is really going to help really differentiate you from other people in your industry. So how do we breathe life into our stories? Now I'm going to add a disclaimer here. Some of this is copy related, which we are going to get into, but a lot of this is just in general. If you were to go on stage and like a TED Talk, or you were to come on and do like a Zoom like this, how do we tell our stories in a way that makes them memorable and makes them meaningful? Because those are both really, really important things when you're thinking about telling your story. So how do we breathe life into your business through your stories? Good speakers, they speak to be remembered, but great speakers speak to be repeated. The way you're going to do that, there's 3 ways. You're going to develop foundational phrases that are your foundational phrases. You're going to invite people into your story, invite them in, invite them to be a part of your journey. And then you're going to tease them before you tell them. We're going to get into each one of these. So develop foundational phrases. For each story that you tell, develop a foundational phrase that your audience can easily remember and repeat. It should be easy to say, audience focused, and usually they say 10 words or less. So these can be your pillars. I used to have a coach that her name was Lauren, and we called them Laurenisms because she'll always say things like expectations, communications, and boundaries. And we know that when she says that, one of her story is going to have, it's going to be talking about expectations, communications, or boundaries within the story that she's going to tell. Relevant phrases, they can be core values, they can be your pillars, they can be things that you say all the time. Like one of the ones that I talk about all the time with my clients is, hey, let's use AI as a tool, but the trick is we want it to do 80% of the work. And then the other 20%, we're going to step in and really make it sound like a human wrote it. So I use a lot of AI for like research and stuff. So you're thinking developmental phrases, things that are going to be really easy for people to remember, because if you're using these short phrases, like it said, good speakers speak to hear, to be heard. Great speakers speak to be repeated. And so using little short phrases like this makes it really easy for your brain to latch on, to hook onto those things, and for you to be repeated. So I hope that helps. We're inviting them in. So when we share a story, whether we're doing it in words or we're doing it in a more oral form, we're going to invite them in by saying things like, imagine being in my passenger seat driver as I went through the drive-through on this dark, stormy night. Or imagine putting all of your time and talent into building this course and spending $62,000 trying to market it, and then you make less than $1,000. That's where Jess was when I met her. It's a gut punch. And you're now invested because you're like, well, did you help Jess? Like, tell me more. Or why were we at the drive-through on this dark, stormy night? So you're going to paint this picture. We're starting to really bring people in. One of the easiest ways to do this, I have found, is when I do a lot of my writing, because even when you do a speech, you're going to start by writing your main points down. But I always pretend like I'm talking to my business bestie, or my ideal client. It's not always the same person. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But I always pretend like I'm talking to her because it helps me put it into perspective. What am I trying to convey to my friend? And then you're going to tease them before you tell them. A lot of times, this is what we would call the hook. We want, what questions can you plant in your audience's mind, so that they will get answered as you tell your story. And then let's talk about how we use this in our business. So this is talking about video. Video is a great way to tell your story. They say that 5-minute videos can do, I want to say it was like 10,000 words written down in a copy. And we are really thinking the easiest way to tell your story is to start telling it. And I know this sounds super overwhelming because we'll get into this in a minute, but one of the things I often get told is, I don't want to tell people about me. I don't want to be the face of my company. And we'll talk about it. So how do we use it in our business? We know how to tell stories now, but how do we actually use this in our business and use it effectively? Like I said, stories connect us. They humanize us. Currently, we're getting somewhere, and it depends on the study, but clinical studies are saying we're getting between 4,000 and 10,000 marketing messages thrown at us every single day. That's crazy to me. Just so many messages that we are seeing every single day. And because of that, our brain completely ignores 90% of them. So you could be having a problem, and that message, that person that you need to connect with could be right in front of you. And because of their marketing, you're not seeing their message. It's just completely, your brain is completely ignoring it. Stories give us the opportunity to rise above the noise and to start to really build those relationships and those one-on-one connections that are just really, really important. And I think they're going to become more and more important as more and more people get into business and they use AI. But they're not telling their stories. They're letting AI try to tell their stories. And the thing that I've noticed is more and more people can spot AI copy really, really easily. So if you don't want to tell your stories, tell your client stories. Create case studies that are going to show the transformation. Liz was here, and then we worked together, and now she's here. And this is, how much better her life is because of that. And then the other thing that we really haven't talked about is stories help us create an emotional connection, not just with the people that you're working with or the people that you're talking to, but there are people that I know on Instagram and Facebook and things like that, that I am invested in their story. And their story literally is just, here I am with life. here's what I'm dealing with. And I just I'm brave enough to put myself out there and to tell my story, no matter how that actually ends up looking. And when we start using this is actually in the wrong place, but that's fine. We're going to start using our stories in our copy. It's primarily, like we talked about, case studies. We're going to talk about client stories, things like that. But more than that, we're going to talk about 5 ways that your story you can make your story matter more. Here's the thing. You don't have to have these life-changing moments to write a story. I think I wrote it in here. It's here somewhere, but I always get I always tell people, tell your stories, because the extraordinary is in the ordinary. You may not think that what you're doing is special, but when your ideal clients start watching, it means something to them. Even if it doesn't, even if you think I'm just telling a story about my kids and then I'm relating it back to how I'm running my business. I've actually had people come back to me and be like, I needed to hear this. Or I've had people say, oh my gosh, your story in your email this week, it was just so meaningful. And I had to go and look it up because I was like, what story are we talking about? And they're just stories it's just life, because it's happening all around us. So if we're using our copy to write our stories, we're going to pick stories that prove or illustrate a point. We're not necessarily giving our life story. We're picking a story that illustrates something, whatever it is you're trying to prove. And we can get into my email if there's time, because I think there's probably going to be plenty of time at the end. But a lot of good conversation can come from that. We're going to use language that explicitly connects to your story. Tell them what the point was. Why did you share this story? We're going to keep the audience hooked. We're going to set the scene. And it doesn't have to be you writing a novel every time you sit there and write your email. We're going to make our stories quick, concise. We're illustrating this point. And then we're going to share what you learned from it. Because a lot of times, even if you say, here's my story and here's what I learned, it's so meaningful to someone because they don't have to go through the same experience that you just went through, because you just went through it for them. So we're picking a story that proves, illustrates, or at least introduces your point. So stories are powerful vehicles through which meaningful points travel. Your story, your point, and your goal is to make the story relevant for other people. It's not you just telling the story to tell the story. You're telling the story because you're teaching someone something, or you're entertaining, or you're trying to influence them in some way. You're trying to get them, here's my story, here's what I want you to do with this story. And they're designed, like I said, we're trying to convey an important message. And then we're going to talk about stories. The effectiveness of your story lies in connections that you make after you tell it. It's not just the story. The story is like part 1. We tell our story and then we say, I told you this story because this is how such and such built confidence. I told you this story because this is how it relates to your business. Or, hey, this is what happened to me, so you don't have to go through this. And then you can say, this story illustrates why we have to, make sure our finances are in order. Or this case study exemplifies why it's important to have your copy the right way. So really the trick with stories is that we are telling enough to create a hook. We tell our story, and then usually at the end, we relate it back to business. Or we relate it back to business, or we segue it into the offer that we have that people could actually use, and how we're serving other people, why that is important. You have to start by telling the story and then tell why this story had meaning for you at this time. And then, like with any story, we're kind of going back to elementary school, but we got to have our scene. We got to have our who, what, when, where, why. It doesn't have to be a huge, long, drawn out story. It literally can be Here's where we were at the drive-through. Here's what I learned while I was standing in line to buy a hamburger. And here's why this is a business lesson. Um, and so one of the things that they talk about a lot, sorry about that. One of the things they talk about a lot when you're doing a presentation is think about the words that you're using. Listen to the words that are being used. Are they the right words to convey what you're trying to convey? Do you need to add space? You know, they tell you embrace space, embrace pauses, because that gives people the opportunity to like digest what you're actually saying. So when you're telling a story, and you can do this also when you're writing, you want to talk volume. If you want to yell at someone, all capitals. Don't do that. That people don't like that unless you're doing it in a very concise way where you're telling a story and someone says like, stop, and you're trying to convey that they're yelling. Capitals are fine. And even when you're trying to use pausing while you're writing, space, or I like to do like ... This isn't English school. It's okay if it's not perfect grammar, because again, you're weaving a tale. You're weaving a tale, and you're creating these emotions based on what you're telling them. And then they say that the effectiveness of your story lies in, like we said, what happens after. You tell your story, and then you relate it back to business. In my business, I tell a lot of stories, a lot of business lessons that I've learned from my kids. Sometimes it's about patience. Sometimes it's about, you know, watching my kids. Like last week, my newsletter was about watching my kids play with marbles, and that's physics and how things move. And my business is the same way, like how things move within my business. And I think sometimes you just have to like find something that's mundane and tell that story. And we're going to talk about that here in just a minute as well. And I guess like the most important part for me is, what did you learn from this? What did you learn from this? Or if I'm pretending like I'm talking to my best business bestie, what can I share with her that's going to help her to the next step of her business? What am I sharing that's actually going to be impactful and meaningful for my ideal person? And then here's a couple more secrets. Even your most mundane, everyday experiences are packed with relatable moments and valuable lessons that you can share with your readers. The key is to look for specific, relatable moments in your day that show something universal about the human experience, because we're all in this together, whether we want to admit that we are or not. And we weren't meant to do life alone. So how do we share that experience or share how we're feeling about it? So here's some opportunities. I can actually have a whole list of these if you guys are interested, but we're looking for opportunities in the everyday. Here's things you can write about. What's one thing that surprised me today, and how did it make me feel? Because if you say, oh my gosh, I was so surprised when I was standing in line and the clerk smiled at me, and then we talked for 20 minutes about the weather, or, you know, what's one small victory I had today and how did I celebrate? This one's great because a lot of people forget to celebrate the small victories. And so when you say, hey, today, you know what? We got everybody out the door in 10 minutes, when that is a 14-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 10-month-old, and that's a win. Somewhere, somebody's going to be like, heck yeah, girl, you got them all out the door. That is a good day. Like, and it doesn't have to be these big, huge things. So what's a challenge I faced today and how did I overcome it? Or what's a challenge I faced today and how did I not overcome it? How do I plan to overcome it? What are my action steps? How am I going to do this? And how does this relate back to my business? And then what's a moment today when I really felt connected to somebody, and why was it special? These are things that we don't think about. And yet these are opportunities all around us to connect with people. And then what's something I learned today, and how might it impact or affect my life or my business? There are so many things that we can do as we are telling our stories. So some common hesitations that I have had come up when I'm talking to people about this. My life's ordinary. How do I create stories that people actually want to hear? The extraordinary is often hidden within the ordinary. So pretend like you're talking to a friend about your business and see where it takes you. You may end up with all kinds of ideas and stories from that. What are your core pillars or your core content that you like to talk about around your business? Are there stories or things that have happened to you around that? You might feel like you're talking into the void, but I promise you, someone somewhere is listening. So often we think that we have to have engagement on our posts and we have to have responses on our posts. And I have literally had people come back to me and say, I've followed you for 2 years. I love your stories. Let's talk. Or I don't even need a copywriter right now, but I want to refer you. So can we have a call? Because I love what you're doing on LinkedIn, or I loved what you're doing on Instagram. Someone is watching. I promise you that. And if it helps one person, then it's probably a story worth telling and worth sharing. How do I connect stories to business without seeming corny? I get it. So, oh, I didn't actually connect this. So forget that. Well, I'll tell you how you do it. You relate it. You make it relatable. It's not going to let me delete it, guys. You make it relatable. And the easiest way to do that, I talk about my life a lot, about here's what's going on with my kids. Here's what's going on with my business. Are they working together or are they colliding? A lot of times, if you just are very open with what you say, like, cool, here's my story, here's my business, you may feel like it's corny, or you may feel like, oh my gosh, I feel like I talk about this all the time. I promise you, even though it feels like on your side that you're, oh, it's about the 50th time I've told this story, the same people aren't always listening. Sometimes, especially when I repurpose a lot of my email content into social media content, I feel like I'm telling the same story over and over again. And it's so interesting because 90% of the time when I feel like I'm being corny, someone will come to me and be like, oh my gosh, that was so meaningful. Like, I get it. Like, I needed somebody to understand how I'm feeling right now as a mom. Or I needed someone to tell me that this was okay. It was okay to feel like this. I may not have any of this. So how do I create stories that are in alignment with my business? That's really easy. Refer them back to your content pillars. Refer it back to what's working in your business and refer it back to what's not working in your business. Because at the end of the day, those are all lessons. Or refer it back to lessons that you've learned while you're working in your business or while you're growing. Or like, I thought it was fine, and then it wasn't so fine, and this is how I fixed it. And then how do you find stories and images that go with your stories or create these images? A lot of times I refer back to my branding kit. A lot of times I actually use pictures of me and the kids, usually with the kids facing away from the camera. But a lot of times I do that because those pictures, like we say, pictures are worth 1,000 words, and they're so relatable that I personally use a lot of pictures to tell my stories because that just makes them more real for people. And then how do I tell stories since I don't want my business to be about me? I don't want to be on camera. I don't want to tell people my story. I'm out. Make your ideal clients your hero. Tell their story. Tell where they were when they met you. Tell the problems and things that they had to kind of overcome as you guys were working together. And then tell how you helped them. Because at the end of the day, your ideal clients want to know that you can get them results and you can use stories to actually help them get results. And so do you guys have any questions? I know I kind of went really fast. I was really excited about this.
I have a question. What is your writing process, Kelly? Like if you use a lot of pictures of your life, are you intentional about your day? You're like, I'm gonna write about this later. Or as you write, do you go back through your camera roll and you're like, oh, this one would work? Or like,
Yeah,
how
a
do
lot
you
of
do
times.
that?
So a lot of times when I sit down to write, so this is kind of my process. When I'm writing client emails, we start with themes. What are the theme for the month? What is the theme going to be for the month? What is the offer going to be for the month? From that theme, can I pull out 3 or 4 threads? Kind of like I'm untangling like a quilt. What are these 3 threads within this theme? And then I start writing. And then like for me, a lot of times I will probably easily 75% of the time, I will go back and look at the camera roll after the fact. Yeah, you can use these in your Facebook post. You can use this anywhere. This is kind of what I do. Because a lot of times with my email, I will repurpose them into my Facebook content. So essentially my themes for the week become my theme for the month, my whatever my subject line is for my email. That is my theme for Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. And then from there, what are we pulling out? So usually when I write the email, I try to make sure that I have 3 main points because that's 3 social media posts. And then, but occasionally I will be out somewhere with the kids and something will happen, whether they're fighting over a ball or we're at the science museum or something. And I'll take a picture or I'll suddenly think, wait, I can relate this incident back to business. And I will literally pull out, sometimes I'll pull out my camera and take a picture. A lot of times that's just for me to remember. And then I will usually grab my notes on my phone and be like, email or Facebook post about this. And I'll write 3 or 4 lines so I can remember what I'm actually wanting to write about later. So that's kind of how I do it. I do occasionally use graphics, but what my experience has been that graphics do not, they don't really work as well. I get a lot more engagement when I'm more authentic about it. And I'm just like kind of going on the fly.
Thank you, Kelly.
No problem. So, hey, mom's on a call. Goodbye. We'll fix it in a minute. I'll fix it in a minute. So, any other questions though, guys? Because I'm actually here for you. So if you want to talk about how we can talk about creating stories for you or for your business, because a lot of mine started with, I'm an email marketer. I should probably have an email list. And then, okay, if I'm going to have an email list, what am I going to write about? And for me, breaking it into a monthly theme became a lot easier than trying to say, well, when I started this, I'm 6 months pregnant and I'm going to write 6 months of emails. What is that going to look like? I don't even know what's going to happen in 4 months. And it worked out really, really well because I actually sat down and I wrote all of my emails in about 2.5 days. And for months, I had people come back to me and say like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. That's a great story. I loved it. And I'm like, cool.